Hello and welcome back. I'm Ashok, and this is really opening up episode number 9, building on the last one which we did, number 8, obviously, and in this series, which number 6 to 10, these 5 episodes building on 1 through 5, which presented some time ago, a couple of years ago, my quest to get to the missing code. This was not seen clearly before. I'm suggesting this hologram for first philosophy, for source science, getting to the source of being, deep ontology and logic, primal logic, the origin of language and thought and life and being, the ground of reality, being infinite. We've gone through that. And at the end of the last meditation, I invited all participants, viewers, experiencing this to join me in holding space for the ground floor of being. The double markers are really the sign of the infinity, the infinite space. And this area, the red zone, so to speak, we saw is where we are pretty well across the planet, the human condition evolving over eons to get up information, language and thought and culture and politics and human relations and ethics and arts and sciences, all of that, and a wide variety of scriptures being rendered in technology of consciousness. So the red marker indicates a mind-operating technology that could not be seen here. Because when we look at the content and we try to get a first principle, it doesn't get us to us first. So in a way, even visionaries and prophets and seers and yogis and Buddhas who are tapping into the zone of what's first use this language to try and communicate it here. And this has been a blockade. There's been a blockade. We've gone through this in great detail in the prior sessions. I need to each time almost light up the hologram again to remind us who we are, almost recapitulate what we've been before to take it to the next step. And so just to pick up some of the major themes that have come out so far, and now in this number 9, to go more deeply, because the series is called Surfing Presence, Intimacy with Presence, Living in the Space of Presence. What is presence? The infinite field. Presence is not here. It's absent, it's eclipsed, it's blocked. The mind-operating technology, great as it is, it can produce wide-ranging narratives and worldviews and scriptures and religions and teachings and art forms and sciences and so forth. It's amazing. But this informationized, talk about it, form of experience, of human experience, whether you're the mind or the heart or emotions, all of this is all under the sway of the deep technology of consciousness that shapes all aspects of our lives and all our cultures, experiences. Even with altered states, all of that is still operating under the power of the mind-operating process that makes this possible to see and have content, but it can't see itself. It can't be rendered here. So all attempts we've seen to present allegedly getting to what is first, which is first philosophy, source science, across the planet, over 2,000-3,000 years of attempts of the greatest gifted minds being called by the source, by whatever name we have, we end up somehow trying to render it, to communicate it to folks, to the public, to people. Wittingly or unwittingly falls into the mind-operating process that was not clearly seen, and to see why that to objectify this is not going to work. It hasn't worked. With the best attempts through history of the greatest minds, because the technology of consciousness of speaking and teaching, when it was not clearly differentiated, it was conflated. This was conflated with this. The red was conflated with the fundamental space of the word, presence. The language of presence The language of being. The language. If you use a God name, you don't have to. But if you say God, infinite spirit, right? The language of spirit, the language of Brahman, the language of Tao, the language of Allah, the language of whatever name for the first. If it's authentic, it's going to be hitting the ultimate source of all. And we saw that what begins to emerge from the source. If this is first, but this is derivative, and the derivative life, the derivative form of thinking and culture making and self-making and experiencing with the mind, with the heart, with dance, with music, with all of the art forms that we have, and all the gifted cognitive sciences and mathematics and logic and first narratives of philosophy. If it's laboring under a technology that talks about it and informationizes, you cannot informationize presence. We've seen that. And so the deepest quest across the planet in the human condition, we're humans, we're source sapiens, and we're coded. This is coded in us. And we saw why that must be so. So I'm going very fast to rehearse some of the major themes that have come up 1 through 8, and now to go 9 and more deeply, and follow up on the requests I had to the viewers to join me and hold space with me. Okay, because I'm not seeking to speak where we usually speak, from I, the Ashok here, speaking and giving a narrative. I'm seeking to do what has not been done this way before. We haven't seen this hologram clearly differentiated. It took, to get to this, to see this was already a major advance, which can only be seen from the point of view of the deeper primary source word. From source word, you could see the derivative. And as great as this is, we'll see why it has a ceiling that eclipses it. This technology, great as it is of information, I'm talking about it, an emotional life, all of that, great as that is, it has an objectifying function that cuts it off from a deeper access to the source. So here's a summation of some of the major themes. That the source, by whatever name, is infinite. And if it's infinite, this is the space of infinite. Nothing can be outside of it. And wherever it is, wherever you are, you're in the space of being. Nothing can be without being. Being, word, source, spirit, whatever name you use for the source. I'm using a generic word, source, which means the source of all. And source of all means no one can live outside of the fundamental field of being. So you can't locate yourself outside and say, oh, I don't accept that there is a source. I don't accept that there's something infinite. I don't accept that, you can't say that, because whatever you say, you're already locating yourself in the word space, either source word or derivative word, language forms, language games, a wide variety of different forms of intelligence and literacy in language. You're located somewhere. And so to say, if you were to use any words and says, in the beginning is the word, no, there is no, you're using the source. No one can live or exist without being under the sway of the source, being held and funded. You couldn't be without it. It's holding you right now. Therefore, it's in every iota. Being infinite, it's infinitely pervasive. Being infinite, it cannot be broken into pieces, which is what we can try to do here at this level of technology. To act as if I'm a separate unit, I'm a Lego entity, and everything has its own identity, and it's a poly and pluribus, boundless diversity of units and atoms, atomic entities, and so forth. That doesn't work. We can do that with our minds and our wills and our form in this space with this technology. But that is overruled by a deeper source, force, presence, infinite presence. So why is it done? Because you can't have more than one infinite. We're going to see that this is coded in us. We're all living in the field of being. No one can be without it. You can't. If you deny it, you affirm it. Because whatever you do, you're being held, and you can't get out of that. And you've got to come to terms with this. Because how we see ourselves in this informationized space of culture making and language and theorizing and feeling and emoting and doing our arts and performances and so forth here, which can be always inspired, but it's still it's not gaining access directly into crossing into what is first. So first philosophy, source science, by whatever name, is the long quest, call upon all humans, to get to a deeper encounter with what is, with being, with reality, with source, with presence. Why presence? We saw because if we try to name it here, if we try to name this here, it becomes objectified, informationized, and it violates the very profound logic of what is first. So why is it unum? I'm using the word unum. You're borrowing that from the Latin. It's just like it's in pluribus unum, because to get a different word than unity, it's not just infinite unity. Infinite unity we're calling unum just to demarcate it. Why? Because infinite source, being infinite unum, pervades every possible point. The logic of presence, the language of presence, the infinite word, infinite being, whatever name you use, infinite energy, pervades every possible point and cannot be broken off. And if we're living in technology that alleges that there are separate units and that we're separate and objectified, so forth, then that's what's under critique of first science. So what we suggested in the earlier sessions is, if this is first, if this is the ground floor and we're living in an amazing evolved space in our evolutionary journey as human beings, so amazing technology of having information and talking about it, and narrative possibility, and all the poetics and arts and facts and fiction and all that we do in the highest moments in our life is still made possible by a technology of consciousness that we haven't really faced and marked out sufficiently in relationship to what is first. And so here's a point. If each person, and not just humans, but everything, is operating within this space, couldn't be without being. That becomes an axiom of the infinite. That's why it's the source of all. And it's unum because you can have more than one. So infinitely one. If it's infinitely one, then all of the vast diversity of the universe is going to be still held under the unum. It's not that unum and then pluribus, but unum overflows in pluribus. Unum is pluribus. So if there's a signature of source, of presence, it's infinite unum pluribus. We have to take time to meditate on that. And again, I'm asking everyone joining us, please help hold me. I'm seeking to really speak from here, and not just to speak here, which typically happens. I don't want to go into this and privilege this as first. I want to flip the orientation of our language to go from derivative word to primary word, source word. And to show that if we are holding space within presence and speaking from the grammar of presence, then there's a deeper form of languaging and literacy and communication that we need to enter into to get intimate with presence, which is the long call of the infinite force to come into intimacy and communion with source. And so how do we go from not privileging where we are? We find ourselves thrown as human beings into our culture. We're born into our culture in local historical situations, gendered, and all of the different things that postmodern thinkers past Kant in the European tradition, and the specificity of existentialism that we humans are located and localized in contexts of lives and cultures and ethnicity and all of these things. We find ourselves there. And if source science is right, it says this is not primary. Those existential narrative spaces in which we occupy in our cultural lives that we're born into, it's true, that's how we are. We're situated profoundly in our cultural narrative spaces. But first, science says this is derivative, and being a human here is not the highest form of being called to being a source sapient. Surfing the grammar of presence, the language of presence, source word. How do you go from this being first, which is malpractice of being, to sources first? And if everyone is operating under the source force, and yet here in our human, if we look at the spectrum of cultures across the planet, in the many beautiful traditions and scriptures and art forms and narratives and political forms and economic ways of life and so forth. A vast diversity here. It's pluribus. But pluribus without unum is just scattered. And unum without pluribus you're congealed. So unum pluribus is profound. It means that the infinite ground of being is infinitely diverse. And so we just don't, to use the analogy from the USA talk about e pluribus unum, out of the many one, and we want a more perfect union. So the quest for the holy experiment of democracy in the American Sea, I'm just speaking that way locally for a moment. I'm not privileging, I'm just referring to it as one example. We'll see, this is going to open up amazingly if it hasn't already. And it's not just a more perfect union. We don't want to find a more perfect union in this broken, scattered space of siloed different worldviews and ideologies competing, a narrative form. But this technology can generate widely diverse, boundless, alternative narrative forms of life. But they're still laboring under this technology. That has not been seen clearly before. So if you have a postmodern says that there's diversity is primary, and we have many different life worlds and forms of life and ideologies and narratives, and vive la différence, and difference is primary, not identity, right? And yet modernism allegedly is haunted by, there are fundamental unifying truths in reason for all humans. That's modernism. Postmodernism goes from is rules, no, isn't rules. Identity rules, no, diversity rules. Not one, but many. And the battle goes on for centuries across the planet. Because this technology is saying, we can say yes or no. I, the thinker, can say S is or isn't P. Is or isn't. If one says is, then the other can say isn't. Is identity, isn't is other. Identity or difference. We've gone through this before, but we need to really recall it here again to realize how profound this red zone technology is and how vast diversity. AI also, computer technology, computer code is operating within this space too. And perhaps all of this is AI compared to going into the source, the organic, into the source of intimacy with the flow, with being in the zone and the zen. Maybe that's organic and natural. And this is, since our wills are, we decide, we believe, we vote on it. Our wills shape, within the space, our wills shape, whether individual or collective. Our wills are going to shape our way of life. And this is boundlessly diverse. And yet the point I'm stressing is that we've seen before why it is this matrix, this code, this mind-operating technology can generate vast diversity, even opposed. Modernism, postmodernism, both here. Theism, atheism, both here. Knowledge, skepticism, also here. So the scope of this technology can generate wide, diverse alterities and diversities. So the experiment we're in the middle of doing now, given that we're all under the sway, we're all under the infinite. Everyone is. Just please keep holding space with me and helping us think through from this point of view, which we need to open up and see that there's a profound literacy and language and of presence that doesn't work like the informationized space that currently dominates our human condition. And yet, we'll show, this is what I want to do in number 9 meditation with us, is to show, to just look over the scope of many different traditions over centuries. When you pull out all of the stoppers of the barriers that we have here, which are mind-made. So we'll have the Judaic tradition here, we'll have the Christian tradition here, we have the Muslim tradition, we have the Hindu Vedic tradition, we have many different sides of the Vedic tradition, we'll have the Buddha tradition and many sides, we'll have the sciences and we have the arts, and so they're all in different silos. But what we see in the Unum is Unum cannot be broken away, they're all connected. The word in frontier physics is entanglement. There's entanglement in electrons across the galaxies, instantaneous, that kind of talk. It's very natural. It's here. This is entanglement. Entanglement is an awkward metaphor, as I said last time, because it sounds like you're tangled up, and rather than the musicality of I thou, the I and the other in constant mutual and enhancement all around everything. Buddha got that axiom of source. The Buddha calls it shunyata, emptiness, fiat, and all life is coming out of emptiness, and that's an experiment I asked us to do together before. And so I flipped this and just gave this scary open space, this hologram, removed all of that. How would you locate yourself here? If this is really presiding on all lives, all the universe, every iota, everything is within the space and held within the infinite unum pluribus. Unum is pluribus. So the vast diversity of infinitely diverse points, each unique, is yet nevertheless woven together, mutually entangled. I don't like that. In dialogic interplay at all levels in a fractal light. It's a fractal logic. And so if you remove away all of the artificial silos that we have when we inventory the human narratives and forms of life across the planet in different religions and scriptures and enlightenment teachings and wisdoms and life coaching and arts and music forms and dance and poetics and all of it, and the mystics, a wide range of mystics, where would you locate yourself? Please do this experiment with me. Because it's really in this episode 9 is what I hope to go more deeply into, to illustrate the point that all humans are living in this space. And this space, the profound force, the ultimate force is the infinite force, the source force, by whatever name you use. And therefore it's operating at every point. Because of the ultimate factor, every point is under the sway and call of the source. And all humans are situated here. And as source sapiens, we're being lured and led and drawn from wherever we are to come into a deeper encounter with reality, with being. So in this open vista, Buddha would call this shunyata, or this is presence, or this is what's first. This is first philosophy, first science, Vedic science. It's Brahman, it's Om, it's Tao. How do you go from this to what we had before? If we're going to do cosmology and say in the beginning, right, or if you're going to be a Big Bang theorist, and what are the initial conditions? Is it an infinite black hole? Where did you get all of that from to start with? How do you go from that to this? How do you get culture? How do you get language? How do you get all of the building blocks of our worlds like space and time and cause and substance and relation and number and mathematics and ratios and measures and design and frequencies? And how do you get that how do you go from here to get this? And why is it that whatever we have in our human condition, if you have the word space, then it's going to have a source word. So single bracket space is going to be whatever it is in this techno, but double bracket space is going to have infinite, because every word here is expressing the infinite. So if you have time here, with calendar, clock time, whatever calendar, and we go into time here, it's going to be holographic and fractal, and all points are going to be meeting in the unum pluribus. So the past and the future and the present are flowing in the infinite now. So every point has that fractal, recursive presence. That's why we get up in present. Not the present, but presence, source time. But time is not separate from space. Why? Because of the unum pluribus. So it's space-time. They co-arise from each other. So when Einstein is talking and reaching the space-time continuum, yeah, he might be doing the physics here, but it's really tapping into a point in the grammar and literacy of presence. Space and time cannot be separated. Space-time, past, present, future cannot be separated. It's now time, and time cannot be separated from consciousness. It's mind time, and mind cannot be separated from world. It's mind world, and word cannot be separated from world. It's word world. And therefore, they're all interconnected. How do we make sense? It looks chaotic. To this mind, it looks chaotic. But this fractal logic of presence is profoundly flowing in coherence. This is coherence. The sun is shining through. This is the place of coherence. Again, coherence is the unum, infinite unum, the orchestration of the musicality. That's where number comes from the unum. We get number, quantity. Aristotle, for example, was seeing that if this is a space of thinking and being, and to think is to predicate, when he opened up the European basic of logic after Socrates and Plato, the thinker has a space in which she thinks, and to think is to predicate and subjects with the predicates, and to drop the things with attributes is or isn't, and join the is and isn't S, is or isn't P, and we can say yes or no and believe it or not believe it here. So we, the thinker, can judge it and appraise the content and appraise it yes or no, is or isn't, or question mark, is it, right? So we have operations on this. And so we can have vastly diverse content for the thinker in the space of consciousness and experience in life. Here. So once we step back from all of the different packaging and silos of our great traditions, I invited us to think, where would you locate Socrates and Plato and Aristotle? For example, where would you locate Bantu, African narrative of wisdom of the universe, or feminist narratives, or Magdalene, Jesus, Krishna, Moses, Buddha? You get the picture. Where would you locate? Where are the poets across the planet? Where are the great composers in all different art forms across our great creative arts? Not just the European classical music of Bach and Mozart and other gifted geniuses of musical composition. Or where's Pythagoras? Where is Heraclitus Parmenides? Where is Nagarjuna? Where is the Zen? Where is theoretical physics and quantum, and going from Newton to Einstein and into quantum and Maxwell and Schrödinger and these amazing theoretical geniuses who are moving closer and closer to get the language of nature? I'm just inviting. So I'm seeking to speak in this space. If this is first, and we're all here, and we're packaged in different narrative spaces in our cultural lives, true. But if we step back and open up the space and remove the packaging and just have in an open, unum diversity space, and see the brilliance of men and women through the centuries. This is going to be in the next sequence, by the way, from 11 to 15. I plan to go in great depth into show, which of our great revered teachers, men and women of the ages across our cultures, took us closer. This is the experiment. To see that we're operating in a powerful form of self-making and culture-making and life and emotions and feelings and all of that and human experience here, and yet we have to really get closer into the zone of being, into presence, crossing into presence. Because the infinite force is operating at every point. And that's why I say in the Greek philosophy, the telos, everything has a telos. Why? Because it's almost like a compass. Every point is like a compass pointing to the source. Aristotle begins as that all things aim at the good. The good is that at which all things aim. And isn't it important to know the good so that we can have a competent, good life? For example, I'm just pointing that out. So when we look at some of our great, admired men and women, first thinkers, first responders. So here again, everyone is living under the call of the first. Okay, everyone, even people who are in ignorance and denial, they couldn't be in the ignorance or denial or evil. You can't do evil with outside of the space that's going on here. No one can be outside. You're going to be, if you deny and you're a nihilist and you're denying that God doesn't exist or there is no source, I don't want to hear about logos or anything like that, there is no meaning in life, right? You're using it. But that's the paradox of denial. If you're going to deny, you're still going to be lodged somewhere in this space. No one can be outside of it. No. whatever, you've got to face the fact that the infinite, unified unum source is operating at every point in the fractal logic that can get blocked and eclipsed here, but it's still going on here. And if, for example, you're using the language of God, you say the infinite rules the kingdom of God, the queendom of Sophia, being first, presides everywhere, then it's going to be here as well. It's going to be in every person, even though we may be cut off by our own wills and constructs together collectively in our conspiracies of the cultures and cultic forms of life that we enter into by our collective wills. It's still not flowing in the space of being. So wherever one is located, right, the question I asked us to help with is if you had to make an inventory of which of the greatest minds of the last 2,500 years, right, first philosophers, first responders, you would say opened up space and pioneered the opening into this space first. But what I'm seeking to do is to capture what gets lost. Because once we silo it, once we put Jesus over here, and Moses over here, and Buddha over here, and Krishna over here, and science over here, and artists over here, and dancers over here, and so forth, first of all, it's artificial. These silos and Lego pieces really break access to the flow, to the fractal logic where we flourish as who we are. We discover who we are in persons here. Humans are here, we're source sapiens, but we're desourced. And what we've seen in earlier episodes is that if we're, to the extent that we're here and desourced, we're going to be in fragmentation. Life here is fragmented and scattered and disconnected, discoherent. And life here is in the flow and coherence. This is where we have nonviolence. This is where we have the ethics and moral life, a flowing in sync with the fundamental law of unum pluribus. We saw that earlier. Unum pluribus, why is it the moral law? It means since every being is coded with source, that the unum pluribus operates at every point. It's ubiquitous. It's omnipresent in the field of being. So to have a unit is to already have that I-thou built into it. It's not a separate Lego piece that can be severed. It's going to be connected always, interconnected in the unum flow. That's the Buddha's principle, for example. But entanglement is beginning to see that it's not just electrons that are entangled, meaning that everything is co-arising and correlational in the fractal logic. This is a deeper bound, the logic of presence of the infinite is a profoundly deeper technology of flow and consciousness in the Zen zone than the great powers that we have in informationized life and space and feelings and emotions and human institutions and so forth here. So I was inviting us to think then, if we just remove all of the barriers and can, for a moment, think about where would you locate some of our great heroes, and gifted artists and others whom we felt you inspired. Right? Everyone can be inspired. When inspiration is when wherever you are, you have a moment when you're in the zone. An athlete who is practicing and working, but then has a brilliant performance, almost out of body, this body into a higher yogic martial arts body in the zone. When you start getting into the zone, for that moment, right? That's a moment of inspiration, because here in this little holographic. Wherever you are, you're always held by this always is surrounding everyone. So the infinite is already here. So when scriptures would say strange things, that the kingdom of source is at hand. And you know things like that, then you can begin to see the source science. Of course, the presence is everywhere. It's at hand. It's not far away. So right where we are, even though we may be cutting ourselves off and objectifying and playing that game and seeing myself as an individual cut off from everything else in my own private existential space and condition and so forth, infinite is right there. It cannot not be. So any scripture that would say that, or allege that, or declare that the source Om is here, or Shunyata, or we're all Buddhas. We're all Buddhas. Why? Because this is already inscribed and encoded within each person. Each person has the Buddha within her. So how do you awaken it? Which is the question of not privileging a derivative form of consciousness and life, experience, but to somehow invert to source first. That was a great question that in this series we're trying to say. If this is first and this is ever presiding and operating on every person, then everyone is living under the influence. I spoke about that last time. LUI, living under the influence of the infinite source. Okay, we got that. Even if you're in a negative space or ignorance or evil or denial or whatever it is, you're still living under the influence. You couldn't think, you wouldn't be without it. So everyone is located. And there are those who have spontaneous moments of being inspired to tap into it because it's in us. We have inspirational moments, but we come back to everyday life. But there are those amongst us over the centuries who stand out as brilliant, pioneering first responders. And this is really what I'm zeroing in episode 9. I want your help. Given all the gifted humans, men and women, across, take away all the silos and separations and just have them here, wherever you would locate. Please do that experiment. Where would you locate a great painter, a Van Gogh? Let's use that example. And where would you, a great scientist, a mathematician, a great dancer, a singer-songwriter, performer, an actress, a political leader, and so forth, all our heroes, and men and women. Where would you locate them? And here's a question I'm asking your help with, and everyone to join in this. Who amongst these, or you think, are pioneers to really open up this holographic space? So if Jesus is the Logos, if you use the word Logos, and Jesus is in the human form, the incarnation of the Logos, and Jesus is teaching, and allegedly speaking from the Christ Logos language, but it's lost in translation very likely if we download the teachings of Jesus. If Jesus is a Logos speaking, source speaking, in the human situation, existentially, to the human condition. And therefore, this language, every word here has an analog. A word here is not the same meaning as a word here. Words here have a deeper meaning. If you hear, I am the way, the truth, and the life, understood in source Christ language, it's not the same as saying, I am the way. If you have I and the source are one, it doesn't mean I am God. This logic, if we're one, then we're the same. If we're the same, then I'm saying that I'm infinite. I got this. I'm infinite. No, that's bad. That's a mistranslation across the finitizing, informationized, objectifying language and the source script. So the language and words and utterances here have a different logic and force and language and literacy than here. And if our gifted teachers have been able to open up space to help humans migrate from this alienation from source, that's what this line means. This technology, which has not been clearly seen, is a prerequisite. Seeing this is a prerequisite for some stepping back, detaching. All of this talk in scriptures, if you got to detach, not just from the ego. The ego is a symptom of something deeper. Technology. How do you detach from the mind operating process which you can't see? Because it allows you to see. Your technology allows you to have experience. And by the way, if someone's going to do some theory as an advanced theoretical physics, astrophysics, or whatever the field, of trying to get a narrative of what is first and saying, oh, it's frequency, it's vibration, that's already derivative. But where did you get vibrations from? And when you say vibration, it's not the same as vibration here. So whatever theorizing that's going on, the theoretician has to ask herself, am I situated in a technology that is deramped and cutting me an alienation and alienating me from a deeper access to first philosophy, first science, the first narrative? So what we're seeking to do is is really, once we remove all of the imposed constructs of silos and separations, and we can see, just begin to see our gifted first responders, let's call them. Everyone is a responder, being called by, everyone is living under the influence. There are those among us who are negative and nihilism, ignorance, evil, and disgrace and malpractice. That's true. Right? And there are those who are inspired moments where we get into the zone and model for that moment. But there are those who are in a more deeper, concentrated, has been able to see it, like a Miss John of the Cross or Rumi. There's a field beyond good and bad and judgment. I'll meet you there, right? Or even someone like Martin Buber, who's saying there are two kinds of meeting, I, it, and I, thou. But even that can be conflated. When I read Martin Buber, ich and du, I and thou, there are two ways of relating. I and it, objectified, or I and thou. But I and thou meeting an other that's in sacred space is not the same. So how do you read Buber not as making a distinction within this space, but making a distinction between life here and relations here and deep meeting in sacred space, which is moral space and nonviolence, where we don't objectify self and other. To participate in this technology is to objectify self and other, and that is a form of violence to the sanctity and sacredness of the other, of nature, of other persons, of other worlds, other forms of life in this nonviolent space. This is the space of nonviolence. This is ethics. And it all comes from unum pluribus. I hope you can see that. So when I invited us together to say, okay, how do I get ethics from here? From I'm sorry for this. How do you get ethics? How do you get Christ? Can someone bring out that Christ is here? The ethic that Buddha is here. Shunyata, co-arising of all things. Fractal logic is here. Source is overflowing, the plenum. And even those who speak and keep going back and forth about, what's first? God, the God of the Bible is not primary, it's a demiurge, there is a monad, and the monad is but still it's not understanding how the monad, is this the monad? It's not the monad. Doesn't begin. This does not begin or end. If you say in the beginning, you're already embarking in the wrong source. To use this language of beginnings and time and start, and where did it all start? What is the cause? The first cause. Where did it all begin? Already is derivative. If you try to take those mental constructs and conceptual derivative logic and literacy to try and understand presence, where did this come from? What's in the beginning? And how did the world appear? And why is there a world? And where is the world? Is it here or here? So please keep both of these hologram in mind, and what I'm inviting us to think about. And I'll go more deeply in the next episode, which will be the climactic from 6 to 10. Where I will take more time and show how science has been trying to respond, the greatest scientific minds, how mathematicians trying to understand and deal with the infinite, calculus, how logicians have been trying to get to the fundamental logic, and meditative thinking, from predicative thinking, informationized thinking here, and this logic, and the constraints of this logic, to meditative thinking. Meditation is not here. The ego doesn't meditate, that's egotation. Egotation is not meditation. Meditation is able to enter on what is first, is to perform first philosophy, first science, Vedic science, source science. What is first? So what I was saying before, if the holographic open space has Christ built in, where is the Christ? It's in the unum pluribus. Which means what? That wherever you are, the source is encoded within you. And therefore, you and the source are in a deep, intimate connection. There's use God talk, I and God. Okay. I and God are in relation, intimacy. And if I and God are in unum, connected, then the pluribus is also sacred. and therefore I and the other. My link with the source is the Christ link, the avatar. We're connected with the Buddha space. The Buddha is the Christ. Krishna is the Christ. Jesus is the Christ. Or anyone, Magdalene is Christing. And in the Christian tradition, I know I'm moving in many different, but we're out of the silos now. Let's dance. Let's bring in Magdalene. And the Nag Hammadi scripts and texts showed the teaching of Jesus was not to found a religion or doctrine, but to help people enter into the Christ, because the Christ is with us. And Jesus, in teaching, as a Christ, is not equal to Christ. The Christ is in the beginning in that talk, even though it's awkward talk for what's first. So when Jesus is saying the Christ is from the beginning, and he's trying to help us find our Christ. Why? Because we're Christed. Humans are Christ sapiens. For example, Krishna is trying to help Arjuna, the everyday person here, and speaking from this voice. Krishna, speaking the Om script, is attempting in the Bhagavad Gita to help Arjuna become aware that he's in a fragmented, broken space with the fratricidal war that's before him, and his own separation, a collapse of meaning, because this is meaning. Meaning is coherence and flow. In the unum pluribus, that's primary meaning and truth and cognition. It's source science. It's not just opinion here. So it's not a matter, I'm going to vote, why? I like Jesus. Or no, I like Moses. I have Mosaic persuasion. No, I like Allah. I vote on Allah. Allah is my truth. No, I'm a scientist. I like that. I like science and Christianity. My Christianity. I'm a Catholic, but I'm also a scientist. Right? And I'm also in my therapy. I'm going to my therapy, and I'm a Jungian. I'm following Jung with the anima, the animas, and the archetypes of Jung. I'm jumping around intentionally because the silos are removed now, and a great gifted dream. Where's Freud? The ego, the id, and the superego, and trying to understand the psyche, the soul. And Jung is breaking away. Says no, there's a collective unconscious with archetypes. The animas are in every person. Is that an intercode transition? Would Jung be someone, a first responder, who's trying to open up the space? Is Jesus a first responder, pioneer of the highest order, trying to open up this space, to recognize the difference between being here in alienation from Source and crossing into intimacy with Source? Is Buddha a pioneer opening this space? Is the Vedic science of the rishis and meditation, the yogis, and Krishna and the Gita opening this space? Is Shankara, Advaita Vedanta, that this is dual and this is non-dual? But even to say that can still, without the code, you can say dual and non-dual. Here, I'm still laboring under the informationized language that the everyday person, allegedly the listener, the student, is listening in this language. Arjuna is here, listening to Krishna. How does that dialogue unfold? With a lot of trouble. Arjuna has, in the beginning of the Gita, has very annoyed with Krishna's speech. It doesn't make sense. His logic, he's using this logic, and Krishna is trying to help him do the yoga and shift the technology into the Om logic. Yoga is here. So does Krishna get recognition as a pioneer? Just because a teacher teaches, it doesn't mean that that teacher has really significantly opened up this hologram. For example, when Jesus is speaking beautifully, allegedly, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and it's being heard here. I am the way, no one cometh unto the source but by me. He doesn't mean me here. The I am. And thinkers are bringing this out. That the Magdalene teaching and the Gospel of Thomas is seeing that Christ is consciousness. It's not a person. And Jesus, speaking the Christ, was helping to create a bridge where we can discover the Christ within each of us. Because if we're unum pluribus, then we're bound together. So to violate you is to violate me. To violate and objectify the other is to objectify and violate me. To judge the other, yes or no, is to be judged as well. All of these things. What's the intercode intelligence? This code and this code. That's the question I'm trying to bring to the and ask your help. My whole life is labored as an intercode. How do you go from this code is first? No, source code is first. And what is the journey? You want to say how to. What is the technology that I'm going to use if I'm lodged here? If I'm a scientist or a performing artist or an actor or a human being lodged here in some ideological narrative form of life, and I'm beginning to see that there's a deeper way to be a human, myself, that there's a deeper me, an I am version that's beyond all of the labels and the CV that I'm carrying as my identity, building up all my life, my narrative of all the substance and attributes and names and tags that I carry as my CV, right? I'm learning from yoga teaching and from Christ teaching and Buddha. That's not you. That's a derivative version of you. Let go of that and come into the primary I am. What is the I am? What kind of a pronoun is I am? It's not like an ordinary program I. When you say I here in the Lego silo derivative logic as a separate identity, use a pronoun instead of a noun, right? It's allegedly picking, but the I am pronoun is a different pronoun, it's a different language, the language of presence. The I is I thou. The other is connected with the I. So I am is a different form of life, a different, deeper life in presence. And that's a moral space of experiencing the interface, interconnectivity, and interstices between. It's not a separate chasm between I and other, but an intimate connectivity. And that's a moral space. Why? It's use God language. God is goodness. Why? Because goodness is an unemployable force. So if in the case of the United States drama, again, I know I'm jumping, right? The e pluribus unum, the holy experiment of we the people, is we, is we the people here, all of a diversity of different silos and ideologies and parties, and divisions and narratives that are duking it out and fighting it out. Is that the democracy, the demos space? Or is there a deeper way of a more competent pluribus? Yes, multiplicity and diversity is vital. And of course, it's vital here. Infinite diversity is deeper. Diversity here is deeper than diversity here in cages and nets and artificial constructs. To be a unique individual, which means undivided, Advaita. Individual is divided, individual is united. But to be united is to be connected in the unum pluribus. That's a more perfect unum is here. But a more perfect unum is a more perfect pluribus. Because unum pluribus is primary. So pluribus here without the unum is scattered and broken. There's no demos, there's no holy experiment. There's no connectivity. It's a violent space. So pluribus, mere diversity without unity, is not using unity and difference here. Its alterity here is sacred. Otherness is sacred. Diversity is sacred. But it's always connected in the infinite musicality of the infinite force of goodness, which is the unum pluribus. So this is just a quick excursion with you, and you can see how it's overwhelming. That I'm inviting us to think about, where would you locate our most gifted thinkers and performing artists and creative geniuses, men and women, through the ages? Who amongst them have been, pioneering first responders? Everyone is living under the influence of what is first. We got that. And that would include people who are alienated, cut off, and lost in darkness and not finding meaning in life and self-harming and all of that's going on, evil and so that's still within the space of the infinite source. But then there are people who are right at the edge and inspired. And they get inspired. They breathe in for a moment. It opens up. This opens up and the athlete or performing artist finds herself here for a moment, inspired. And we just have to say that person is in the zone. That person was touching into a deeper way of being for that moment. But that's going to, now we default back to this operating system. I come off of the soccer field or the track or the basketball court at that moment, or the baseball, whatever the sport is, a cricket, whatever it is, and I go back to the locker room, so to speak. And I'm back into my normal identity and cultural space. And my buddies and my teammates are here with me. Why can't I sustain a life in the zone? Is the question. We sustain life here. Why? Because we're deeply embedded in the code within us. And our culture teaches and repeats it in our education, raising our children, and in our religious life. It reiterates this technology as first by default and not this. So how many times are we performing and living and supporting this technology? And now, if our great first responders, pioneers, are saying, no, this is derivative, and this is pathological. The fragmentation, objectification, and separations and constructs where our wills are running the show or trying our collective wills, a tribe, whatever it is. So it's not the source flow. This is where we flourish. And when we're inspired with a great musical composition, whether it's whatever musical form it is, in any of the many beautiful pop music genres that there exist, you hear a beautiful song and it touches your heart and you feel open. Wow, that lyricist and that performing, her voice just touches my heart. Tears flow. My heart is open. That artist is gifted, wherever he or she may be. And she's playing the cello, he's playing the cello, and you feel it. The Bach cello concerto, for example, or the raga, or Ravi Shankar, or the tabla, and it just takes you right into a deeper rhythm. This happens. But then we come back after, right, and we default to here. So the question is, if this is unsustainable in a serious way, or it's unsustainable for human cultures, and it's a violent place, and it's in breach of the source. So we're using the resources of the source. With every word we use, we're tapping into source word and downloading it to where we are. All of our languages, all of our different logical codes and technologies, like computer technologies, all using it, and yet we're not acknowledging it. So in a way, I don't want to say it's a plagiarism, but we couldn't be without being. And yet we could live as if we're not being immediately held and sourced and funded by being right now, but we are. And to become aware of that, which is the human journey, because we're coded, we're source sapiens, and source sapiens are being called relentlessly to honor the sourcing. Because that's when we flourish and blossom in our but the technology of consciousness can be holding us back. And even when we say, I want to meditate, the meditation is not here. Meditation is the activity, not activity of the ego, but a profound code shift. That's what meditation is. From egotation to sourcetation. That's a better word. Sourcetation is honoring, surfing the source, surfing what is first intimately, in communion with the source. And that's what yoga is calling, that's Christ is calling, the Buddha is calling, the unified field is calling. I know I jumped around, I'm going to pull out all the silos. I know that's frightening. How dare you place Buddha and Krishna and Muhammad and Lao Tzu and Magdalene and the great mystics, east, west, north, and south. And different cultures are all, located here, but all under the influence. So the point is to, and this is what I'm going to do in the number 10 very soon. Again, this is number 9, and I just want to open up that challenge for us. Please take this seriously. If this is the ground floor and this is first, where are you? And if this is always operating on each of us, everywhere, and yet we're cut off from it in all kinds of ways, and in our deepest despair, in the dark night of the soul, and the lights go out, and whereas even though the light is always here, right? And we have our heroes, our men and women who are inspiring us, and we're following their teachings and so forth, but are the teachings here? Or to which of our great scriptures, when read here or read here, scriptures here is a different power than scripture here. A teaching understood here in the Unam space is going to have a different power than here, and yet everything is still kind of coming from the Unam. That's the point I'm making. It's Unam all the way. I'll conclude on that note. Unam is whether you call it God, whether you call it Om, whether you call it Ta, whether you call it Allah, whether you call it Yah. The first pervades the entire field, and it's the greatest infinite force operating, and nothing can be without it, and everything is coded with it. And the call of Source is to source up in our journey as a human, to come into intimacy and flow with a place of love, with a place of ethics, with being a human, with flourishing, with well-being. This is the place of being. If we're cut off, our being is still compromised. If this is where we're human here, as great as we are, we're still pre-human. If we have the demos and democracy here and it's failing, it's because we haven't gotten to the demos, a more perfect pluribus, a more perfect unum. That's unum pluribus. Unum is pluribus. I hope you're getting that, right? And from the unum is the source of any possible format. If you have mathematics, mathematics comes from the unum. You couldn't have numbers. You couldn't have identity without unum. You couldn't have a word without unum. You couldn't have a belief system. You can't have a system without unum. Nothing can be without unum. So in a way, the unum axiom, you could say if unum is a source is God, or whatever name we wish to use, we say it's Allah. Then it's Allah all the way. And Allah in every iota. And that's why I surrender to Allah. Islam, surrender to Allah. What? Surrender, putting derivative first to entering into Allah first, or Yahweh first, or Brahman first, Shunyata first, beings first, presence first. And that's first science, first philosophy. So here we don't have, this science is missing. And that's where earlier philosophers, first philosophers, Descartes, as I said before, meditations of first philosophy, on first philosophy. I produced a book, my third volume, called Meditations of Global First Philosophy. First philosophy has to be global, meaning what? Not just, not the globe in that sense, but all possible worlds are coming out of first philosophy. The journey to first philosophy, to the grammar of presence, the code of Logos, Sophia. And that's what philosophy is. Philosophy is the love of Sophia. Wisdom is connecting with the source of our being, and the light and the word and meaning and truth. Truth is here. That's why our geniuses saw that this is opinion, because if I embrace a narrative as true, I'm a scientist, a physicist, or I'm a psychologist, and I follow Jung or Freud or Adler or whomever, Lang, or a cluster of them, whatever it is you believe in, your will, I vote on this. This is my belief system. This is my religion. This is my guru. This is my teacher. You are using your will to vote on it, rather than letting the source vote on you. Voting here, opting for saying, yes, I say yes to this, or I believe in Christ, Jesus is my Lord, Jesus is my Savior, you could believe it here. But if Jesus was saying that, follow me, I am the way, meaning enter the Christ, Christ is first. God, source is first. I and the Father are one doesn't mean I equal Father. I'm not infinite. You're one with the infinite here, but it doesn't mean you are the source. So there's a strange logic, a fractal logic, where the infinite is always infinitely other and first. It's always other infinitely, beyond bounds. And it moves all life. And that's the call to becoming human. Culture here is going to be profoundly different than the fragmented silo ideologies and narrative forms that we subscribe to in this space, individually or collectively in a group. There can be something cultic about culture. But beyond ideology, that's what our great teachers, Buddha is saying, when you enter the Buddha space, is beyond any ideology, belief system. It's not what you believe in. And so here, the best, whatever your truth is, single bracket truth, is not the same as truth here. This is huge. In other words, Christing and the Quakers were taking the Society of the Friends of Truth. And I pointed out I'm teaching at Haverford College, founded by the Quaker community outside of Philadelphia. And the Quakers saw there's God in every person. Where'd you get that from? That's inscribed in the source. That's source of wisdom. There is source in every person. And so how do you organize an institution of a college education, of the meeting of sacred beings in a community of mutual respect and honor? How do you do that? Have we done that here? What is the holy experiment of USA? Of a sacred city of brotherly love, for example, Philadelphia, right? Where the demos, we the people, rule, and we form governments to support the people. Is we the people here or here? What would it be to be we the people? By our vote. Voting here is not the same as voting here. This is kind of rigged by the mind-operating narratives that we subscribe to, by the will. But a true vote for demos, what is first? The human, the first person. Being a first person is going to be a founder of the demos, the democracy. So I hope I'm inviting everyone to join. Help, please. What is culture going to be like here when we mature from this technology to the source, literacy and technology, and arrive on the home base of who we are, the land of the free. It's not geography. It's mind-operating technology of culture. This is the land of free agency. That's a lot to cover. And I have to go fast. And next time, it's going to go faster. I have to. Because what I'd like to do is imagine locating the great men and women of the ages across cultures. Taking the last 2,500 years, where would you put them? Performing artists, the great inspired moments and so forth. And who amongst them have been pioneers in trying to open up this shift? Would Jesus be one of them? Would Krishna be one of them? Moses. Is Moses one of them? Where's Abraham? In terms of opening up the founder of all nations, gathering all the tribes together, loving, putting God first, the infinite first, and making sacrifices. The whole theme of sacrifice is to somehow you have to almost let go of who your ID is, the CV you're living all your life, and to sacrifice it, which is to say to let go of this mind-operating technology as first, to go as a great pioneers have been said, into the I am space of flow when you're in the Zen, when you're flowing in the moral law. Not my will, but source will flowing, the fabric of reality. So in number 10, and that's why I have to go into the next sequel from 11 to 15, to really do honor to these great men and women removed from their silos and ask exactly who and when and how did they really open up and pioneer our shift from being embedded here to seeing this and seeing a deeper first source science. Source science is going to be the foundation of any science. As great as that science is here operating under this technology and not yet seeing that my physics and my computer science and my biology and my medical neuroscience and all of that is operating under a technology that may be prejudicing and prejudgment, compromising my encounter with reality in a deeper way. So let's pause and breathe. That's a lot. And imagine what I have to go through to hold that space. That's why I invite you to help me. To hold this space and remove the silos and keep all of these great scriptures and geniuses and traditions and men and women and mystics so they keep echoing, this is the truth and not this, and it's beyond word. This is beyond words, the mystic would say. These words can't get that. And so forth. or a poet like Blake, there's infinity in a grain of sand, eternity in those kinds of visions. How do you locate? Who are the helpers? Who are the primary, first responders? That's a nice metaphor. First responders to an emergency. This is an emergency. And our first responders are the ones who are urgently saying, we've got to do this. We've got to go first. We've got to do the source science. We've got to get to the fundamental field with urgency, because our survival and sustainability depends upon this, reaching that, and moving from this individually and collectively to a more realized form of culture. It's living in the law of the unobservable principle of fabric of reality. So please join me. I hope I haven't scared you away or just bored you and driven you away. I hope I'm doing all I can to open up a new civilized space and honor the great men and women of the ages who are inspired and doing whatever they can to help us become aware of the crossing. And I'd like your help. Who amongst these are the greatest pioneers that helped to bring this out? For me, this is new. This has never been seen this way before. And that's why I'm sharing it. And that came out in my episodes 1 through 5, Gangadin's quest for the missing code. Here's a code, here's a hologram for that fractal space. And now, when we see any narrative in the light of Unam, since Unam is happening everywhere, and certainly presiding in our greatest inspired, if we see Jesus not here, but in the Unam space, it changes the scripture. If you hear Krishna in the Gita, not having a dialogue here, but Krishna is the Om in the Om space here, it changes the whole power of the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of Source. If we see Buddha's teaching the Four Noble Truths, not as truths that we have informationized, but truths that open up the space of Shunyata and emptiness and the Buddha Dharma of ethics and well-being. I'm just giving examples. So whom amongst our greatest gifted humans, we're all living under the influence, but certain responders are pioneers responding. There are many inspired moments who are in the zone. There are people who are in the zone, but that is not yet opening up the civilized space of the access code to live and sustain a life in presence. And so that's a question I'd like to go into in number 10 with you. I hope you come back and join us in deepening this narrative. Please help me think this through. All the best.